The West is beginning to wake up horribly late to the threat of Islamization in its midst. America, where this process is not as far as advanced as it is in Britain, but it is nevertheless making steady inroads, needs to do much more than it has done. Israel is not just holding the line for the West, militarily speaking, in the Middle East. It is battling the very same Islamist forces that are now achieving critical mass in the West and increasingly threaten its identity and way of life. Israel is not the problem. Israel is the West's solution.
Okay, let's go to another very important video, and that is the great thinker, intellectual, and journalist Melanie Phillips as she spoke at the Shurat Hadin conference. Let's watch her discussion.
Good morning, everybody. It is really such a great honor and privilege to be here today to speak on a platform of the heroic and inspiring Shurat Hadin. So thank you very much indeed for inviting me. Ladies and gentlemen, what is happening to us in the Jewish world is unprecedented. It is a global onslaught on the entire Jewish world. It is an onslaught that was triggered by the October 7 atrocities, triggered by Islamists who believed and still believe that their moment had come because they had breached Israel's security, hitherto thought impregnable even by them. They believed and still believe that the defeat of the Jews presaged the defeat of the Christians. First, Israel would be destroyed, and then the West. And they still believe that. The crowds on the streets of London and other cities who are demonstrating allegedly in favor of Palestine are actually demonstrating their power over the West, that they feel that their moment has come to finally launch, having launched the final onslaught on the West, which will succeed. These demonstrations are delirious, and they were delirious when they started on October the 7th, before the Israelis had stopped even being slaughtered. They were on the streets of London in a delirium. We are going to win this. This is our final battle. And that delirium continues horribly on our streets because there has been no pushback by government and other authorities. We have seen open incitement against Jews on the streets. We have seen and are continuing to see the most brazen anti-Semitism from celebrities and other public figures, which has become normalized. We have seen and are seeing this steady rise of an Islamic political bloc in Britain, and I'm afraid to say also here in America. You're a few years behind Britain, but I'm afraid it's the same thing. We are seeing an alliance, an unholy alliance between the left and the Islamists, an alliance which has turned language and thought in itself inside out to produce an image of demonic Jewish control over the world. It is as if we are living through a posthumous victory of both Stalin and Hitler. Why has this happened? There are many reasons, complicated. Holocaust guilt by the West is part of it. The idea that they can never again have the reality of the Jew as victim. They have to cast the Jew instead as the victimizer to escape their own historic guilt, not just for the Holocaust, but for centuries of Jewish persecution. We have the rise of identity politics based on the hatred of the Western nation state, the hatred of Western culture itself, which has produced for decades an onslaught by Western intellectual elites on the West's core values. And the onslaught on the West's core values has meant an onslaught on Judaism, because it is Judaism, although Christianity is, of course, the infrastructure upon which the West is based, but Christianity didn't come from nowhere. One could say Christianity was a Jewish sect that got slightly out of hand. The values that everybody in the West holds dear, secular or religious, are fundamentally Jewish values, and we're very shy of saying that. Why is all this happening? Well, I think that the Palestine cause is absolutely central. The Palestine cause, as we all know here, is based on nothing other than the destruction of the Jewish state, But more than that, it is also based on stealing the Jews' own history in the land from them. But the Palestine cause has become the cause of causes in the West, which of course is in the business of destroying its own core values which come from Judaism. No coincidence. In my view, the Palestine cause is a form of holy war, Islamic holy war, and it is a Trojan horse for the Islamization of the West. By adopting the language and the moral inversion of the Palestine cause, the West has bought into the agenda for its own destruction at the hands of Islam. This is a death wish by the West. And if you have a death wish, you cannot fight a death cult, which is what the West is facing in the forces of Islam. It cannot fight it because it no longer knows what it is. The West no longer has the will to defend itself because it no longer knows what that means. And insofar as it ever knew what it means, it has tried to destroy it by telling itself that the West is to be hated. This has created a vacuum into which has marched the Islamists to conquer the West because the West is paralyzed. So what can we do to fight back? We can do a lot to fight back, and we're not doing it. We can do a lot to fight back with a very different strategy. But unfortunately, the Jewish world has never even had a coherent strategy. Until now, the responses of the Jewish world to this, unlike, for example, Shurat Hadin, which I think is almost unique in its proactive, aggressive attempt to fight back to this. In other respects, the Jewish world's responses have been scattergun, not just ineffective, but strategically misguided. For decades, the Jewish world has allowed our enemies to frame the narrative. Our enemies have been able to hijack the language and weaponize the West's post-truth, post-moral culture to push their agenda that Israel and the Jews are on the wrong side of just about everything that is good and right and true. The world has been made to believe that peace and justice in the Middle East hinge on the Palestinians getting a state of their own. Justice for the Palestinians has been deemed to be the issue that drives all before it. By apparently denying that happy outcome, the state of Israel has come to be perceived as the enemy of humanity itself. This is the big lie that we are all up against. But the Jewish world has never identified this big lie as such and has never fought it. It has never told the world the truth. There is no such thing as Palestine. There is no such thing as the Palestinian people.
Wowzers. So simple. There's no such thing as Palestine. There's no such thing as Palestinian people. But Melanie, there is such a thing as a Palestinian Authority. And we created it. And it's in our land. There is a Palestine, isn't there? It's our own handiwork. We created our own enemy. We built it. And so, yeah, there's no historical Palestine. There's no Palestinian people per se. But there is a team that we've empowered on our land. And that is Israel.
The Jewish world has never told the rest of the world that the indigenous people of the land of so-called Palestine are the Jews, that the Jews are the only people who have any entitlement to any of this land, an entitlement based in law, in history and morality, and they are the only people who have an entitlement to all of it. The Jewish world has never said that. Instead, the Jewish world has gone along with the big lie, appeasing it, shaving off its most dangerous edges, but with too many Jews in the diaspora themselves falling for at least part of this lie. But now, ironically, because of this terrible war and this terrible catastrophe that happened to us on October 7, 2023, there is now an opportunity to seize back control of this narrative and reframe it in the interests of both Israel and the truth. Because of October the 7th and these past 2 terrible years, Israel and the Jewish people, I think, have profoundly changed. Israel will never be the same again. The Jewish world will never be the same again. The trauma in Israel will last forever. It has changed the Jewish people in Israel forever. The grief is off the scale. The trauma is off the scale. But out of this terrible thing has come something truly wonderful. It has produced a sense of unity as a nation. We can all see that Israel has fought in the way that it is done because it knows what it is. It is connected to its past. What we have seen is an expression of the indomitable spirit of the Jewish nation. What has been so stirring to me, and I'm possibly to all of you, is what I would consider to be a revival of an ancient, all but buried collective memory. I have been immensely moved, above all, by the sight of those young soldiers praying with their commanders on the eve of going into the battle in which some of them will lose their lives. I've been immensely moved and amazed by the immense demand fueling now the Israeli economy for the production of tzitzit. Who would have believed all these soldiers, most of whom are secular, have gone into battle wearing tzitzit? These are non-religious soldiers. They are wearing the tzitzit under their armor. They are wearing their collective identity as Jews next to their heart when they go to fight for their people. Because they're not just fighting for their country against an enemy that wishes to eradicate it. That is, of course, true. They are also fighting, in their own words, to defend something else, to defend the sacred history of their people. They are fighting in the honor of the sacred memory of all those ancestors going back into antiquity who kept the Jewish people alive. And now there is a spirit abroad in Israel, which people have not seen before, a spirit among younger people. They will not be diverted from defeating the enemy. It is no longer enough simply to what was called mowing the lawn, to keep the enemy down on the basis that they're always going to be there and we're always going to fight them. No, enough. We will now fight to defeat the enemy because we know that only defeating the enemy is what we should be doing. And there's been a realization that this idea of mowing the lawn, this idea of not going too far, this idea of doing what the world expects us to do, that is galut mentality. That is diaspora mentality. That is trying to please and appease the world. But the world we now understand from what we've been living through and are still living through. The world cannot be appeased. It has to be fought. It has been described, and I think most wonderfully, as a move from Talmud to Tanakh, by which I mean this. The Talmud, that collection of rabbinical ordinances, which justifiably can be said to have kept the Jewish people alive since their exile from the land of Israel, is very much a diaspora mentality. It is a mentality which looks inward, which says we are up against a world which hates us, we have to protect ourselves. The Tanakh is full of stories of the Jewish people of antiquity fighting real battles, killing real people in defense of their nation and their people and their faith. And that is what has to be done. And I see that what we are seeing now in this war that has been fought is the resurrection of the Tanakh Jew, the return of the heroic Davidic warrior, strength, not weakness. Now, the war is not over, but we've seen that Israel has amazingly become the strongest power in the region, victories that could never have been imagined. So Israel has a lesson too for the West in how to fight an enemy, but it has a much deeper lesson for the West. We know the West needs Israel, despite what it's saying about Israel. The West needs Israel more than Israel needs it for military intelligence, for military hardware, for military intelligence, for Jewish genius. But beyond that, the West needs Israel for the moral and cultural lesson that Israel is currently teaching the West. Look at Israel's birth rate. It is not a small detail. 3 to 4 children per child. It's not because the Haredim are having so many children. You may be either horrified or delighted to learn that the average Haredi woman who was giving birth to an average of 12 babies per woman is now giving birth to a mere 8 per woman. this birth rate of 3 to 4 children is being fueled by secular people, modern Orthodox people. It's being fueled by the idea that they want to have Israeli children because they want Israel to continue. Why do they want to have Israeli children and want Israel to continue? Because they believe in it, they love what it represents, they understand it represents the Jewish people, they love the Jewish people, they want the Jewish people to continue. What Israel is showing the West is that only by connecting to your past, to your history, will you ensure you have a future. To have a future, you have to want to have a future. The West needs this lesson to survive, but many diaspora Jews need to learn it too, because too many diaspora Jews have drunk the Kool-Aid. Too many diaspora Jews have been seduced by the liberal universalist narrative of the United States Democrats, the United Kingdom's Labour Party, Australia's Mr. Albanese, Canada's Mr. Carney, the narrative of the Brotherhood of Man, Kumbaya, John Lennon's Imagine, a world without religion or nation, a world in which there is nothing to fight or die for. That is the mantra of the modern Western liberal. Israel knows there is everything to fight and die for. Israel is teaching the West that Israel is a nation whose identity is rooted in a history based on the faith of a people in the land. Jews and non-Jews need to understand that this Judaism, represented by Israel, gave the West its civilized values, values such as respect for every human life made in the image of God, the priority of justice and compassion, moral responsibility. To fight, you need to know and love your identity. Israel gets it. Now, diaspora Jews need also to realize you are not just Americans with Judaism added on. In Britain, they're not just British Jews with Judaism added on. They are part of the British people, you are part of the Jewish people and the Jewish nation, and that should come first. First and foremost, you are Jews. Everything else is secondary. Now, this means a change of strategy completely. It means changing from defense to offense. I don't mean offensive, I mean offense in a different way. Supporters of Israel have always played defense. This means that we all argue on the ground defined by our enemies. We are feeding the Gazans, not starving them. We are not committing genocide or war crimes, we're the victim of these things. Once you're on the ground defined by your enemies, you've lost the argument before you've even started. It's just like, when did you stop beating your wife? We've been answering that question for decades, and we wonder why we have lost the argument. Instead, it means taking the initiative by attacking our opponents and doing so on the ground where their vulnerabilities lie, attacking them on their own territory, telling the Western public directly how their media and governments are lying to them. And that means telling the truth for once about what Israel is. Start telling the truths never told. Address head-on the basic lie of Palestine. Call out Muslim anti-Semitism, a forbidden topic by the Jewish community leadership in Britain. Never mention Muslim anti-Semitism. Islamophobia is the same as anti-Semitism. We're all basically facing the same enemy. Really? What a terrible thing our community leadership has done to us. We should be publicizing every statement. We should be publicizing every single statement that the Palestinian Authority is channeling Nazi tropes of Jew hatred. And above all, we should start, for once, properly promoting the love of Judaism, the love of Israel, and the love of Jewish people among our Jewish young. I don't know what they're teaching them in the Jewish schools, but they're not teaching them what they need to know to fight this properly. The West is beginning to wake up horribly late to the threat of Islamization in its midst. America, where this process is not as far as advanced as it is in Britain, but it is nevertheless making steady inroads, needs to do much more than it has done. In conclusion, Israel is not just holding the line for the West, militarily speaking, in the Middle East. It is battling the very same Islamist forces that are now achieving critical mass in the West and increasingly threaten its identity and way of life. Israel is not the problem. Israel is the West's solution. That is the message that the Jewish world should be pushing at every opportunity to reframe the narrative, telling the West that Israel defeats its enemies because it has a will to live, That is because it knows what it is, it loves what it is. By contrast, the West has told itself it hates what it is, it no longer even knows what it is. This is a recipe for cultural suicide. The West is unable to confront the Islamist death cult because it has a death wish itself. Israel is telling the West, you should choose life, and this is how you do it. In my view, this is an absolutely seismic point in Jewish history. This is the Jewish moment. We must rise to it. Am Yisrael Chai.
Okay. I think there's a lot of strong points there. I think the strong point about the West having some kind of death wish, some kind of suicidal kind of attitude. My producer was telling me before the show that progressive folks are just like, I don't know, like if they come to destroy me, it's because I deserve it. It's because my culture deserves it. They hate their own culture. It's self-loathing culture. They don't think that they're just. Israel thinks it's just. I think I'm just. Sue me. I think I'm just. Baruch Hashem. I think I'm just. I think the Torah is just. I don't know if I would know who is just and who is not just if I didn't have a Torah that would keep me going on a path of clarity, of identity. You know, I started thinking to myself, there are many metaphors that you could use for Israel. But maybe one of the most apt ones is anchor. In a world that's unhinged and is not anchored. Let me start that again. A world that rejects the Jewish people and the Jewish story is a world that's going to be unhinged, disanchored, unanchored, without anchor. When you're without anchor, you sail the world if you know where you're going, but if you stop knowing where you're going, you are lost at sea. And you want to kill yourself, or you want to assimilate onto whatever shore you land on. The Jewish people act as a kind of anchor because they anchor the world in a godly attitude, or that's what they should be doing. The Jewish people who lose themselves, the anchor of Torah. It's like now that I think about it, I'm thinking about it out loud with you. It's like an anchor within an anchor. If the Jewish people are anchored, then the world and the world anchors itself in those Jews that are anchored. Then the world kind of, when you have an anchor, it's a little bit like another. I don't like to mix metaphors, but it's like an axis. The world spins on an axis that makes sense. The minute you're off of that axis, the centrifugal force is out, and you're just boom. You're just exploding. You're falling. You're going everywhere. That's what's happening with the world right now. It's so ironic though, because Israel is such an anchor that exists. But here I would say, and this is why I'm not a big Netanyahu fan, I don't think that we have anchored ourselves properly in our identity and in our heritage. And so we got to get back to Bible. We got to get back to faith. And when Israel's anchored, then the world can anchor itself around Israel. Ironically, I think that Israel in many ways is anchored today, but the world is throwing off the anchor of Israel, throwing off the anchor of wanting to listen to God, to have, people are very haughty. They don't want God to channel to them through anybody else. And they don't, when you're haughty against Israel, you're actually haughty against God himself. You just don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I'm not interested in hearing your stuff, God. I don't want to hear it. I am the truth. I am my own anchor or my own ship. And the world is in a lost place a little bit. It's in a lost place indeed.